everyone. Welcome to my screencast. My name is Jasmine, and today I will be going through the website that I made for my EDU 5499 Culminating project. So the topic of my project is pre-assessment in undergraduate education. And the aim of my website is to demonstrate the value of integrating pre-assessment to the beginning of a course to gauge baseline understanding and create an even playing field for all students. My target audience is undergraduate TAs and instructors, lecturers at the undergraduate level. I wanted to incorporate a multi-modality into my Culminating project just to perhaps enhance learning for those who may end up stumbling upon this and watching it. And offering a little bit of insight or reflection into the decisions I made. Yeah, so this website will look at pre-assessment as a means of assessment of past learning in order to guide future assessment for learning. And you might notice that throughout this website, I often take the perspective of constructivist approach, in which it is believed that students are building on that which is within them. So pre-assessment is a way to meet students where they're at and create a baseline in classrooms that is unmatched by other assessment types. So over here on the left, we have the different pages of the website. So first we'll jump into what is pre-assessment. This page offers some definitions for pre-assessment according to the Growing Success document created by the Ministry of Education in Ontario. So essentially, they define pre-assessment as assessment that is used to identify a student's needs and abilities and the student's readiness to acquire knowledge and skills that are outlined in the curriculum expectations. Diagnostic assessment, which is pre-assessment or diagnostic assessment, it can be used interchangeably. Usually takes place at the start of the school year, term, semester, or teaching unit, and is a key tool used by teachers in planning instruction and setting appropriate learning goals. So for the purpose of this assignment, a definition that I have adapted is I will be defining pre-assessment as any and all steps taken to gather information about what knowledge a student has or has not brought into the classroom prior to starting a lesson, and this gathered information is used to modify instruction moving forward. I like to broaden it to any and all steps because rather than traditional assessment forms, I think there's a lot of fun ways that you can measure understanding or misconceptions. So that is why I added that piece in there. So I touch more on the reason why I chose this topic on this page, and that is because of its enhanced importance in undergraduate education. Speaking to my undergraduate education, I don't feel like there was a lot of pre-assessment within my classrooms, and I think that's an area that's really lacking in post-secondary education, especially in large-scale first-year introductory courses where so many people are in those classes, sometimes upwards of hundreds, and they all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different levels of education, different ages. Some are adult learners, some are fresh out of high school, some are from different countries. So aside from prerequisites that are required to get into courses or get into university, there is no measurement for the differences in what people come into a classroom with and their levels of understanding. So that's why I think pre-assessment is so important, because it can radically change the plan of instruction based on what people know or don't know. So I added in this video here from some professors at the University of Saskatchewan, which helps to just further emphasize the importance of pre-assessment in undergraduate education. Down here, I added some times in which you can include pre-assessments at the beginning of the course, beginning of each class, intermittently between topics in a lesson, and beginning of each unit. So at the bottom of each page, you'll find there's some references. Next page. How does pre-assessment enhance learning? So one of the main things that I learned through this assignment that I did not know before is a lot of people come into a classroom actually with a wide variety of misconceptions about topics. So this is particularly prevalent in the sciences field. For example, someone might have learned something in high school, or they may have a particular understanding about a topic. For example, let's give an example, the Krebs cycle. You might have understood it a certain way, and you might have been successful in high school, passed the class for whatever reason, the way you were assessed. Your teacher seemed to be under the impression that you understood the concepts, and then you come to university, and it turns out that that information is actually inaccurate. And if you might hear a different understanding or a different explanation of that topic of a different explanation, of the Krebs cycle, and it misaligns with your understanding, and you might just kind of brush it off to the side because you think what you know to be true is true. However, it's not. And then down the line, this could cause many issues, obviously, in post-secondary education, because all of those misconceptions need to be deconstructed and replaced with accurate information. So that is where pre-assessments can come in handy. They can outline some misconceptions. Next is pre-assessments inform further instruction. So they are a source of feedback. So we all know that feedback is a driving force in formative assessment. Being that pre-assessment is a tool that can be used throughout the term, it is an opportunity for educators to continually be accessing feedback and then implementing that feedback. Pre-assessment also demonstrates learning objectives. So it acts as a signifier to students of what's to come in the lesson or the term. So by doing this front loading with the expectation, students can then visualize themselves at the end of the term having acquired those skills, which can be motivating and encouraging. And it can pique interest within students and allow them to be more present and engaged in learning. Next is keeping tabs on student understanding. So when you do a pre-assessment, that kind of measures where they are at the beginning. And then at some point down the line, there's a summative assessment. You're able to look back and see where the student began, and it's kind of a learning journey throughout the term to be able to see how far they've come. And lastly is pre-assessment of questions, interests, and readiness to learn, as well as preferences. So another great thing about pre-assessment is it provides an opportunity for students to outline their interests and their preferences in learning. So preferences in content delivery and the type of assessment they like, the type of assessment they're usually successful at, whether they like group work, stuff like that. So that can help make a student feel heard and listened to, cared about. And then when they feel cared and listened to, it builds more trust in the classroom. And through trust, students are more open to taking risk and pushing themselves academically, which fosters deeper lifelong learning. So next page, we are going to look at ways to implement pre-assessment into an undergraduate classroom and beyond. Before we start on this page, I will let everyone know I was a little bit skeptical of this page because I included a link to a Pinterest page. However, I tried here to justify my doing so just because I believe that there are many resources online that teachers use and exchange that are helpful. They just are not always based in evidence. So I, down here, tried to make as many connections as I can to my research to be able to support that. So back to the top. I am grounded in my philosophy that making assessment fun encourages participation as well as it encourages open and honest responses. So there's plenty of fun ways to incorporate a pre-assessment, and they provide varying levels of insight into conceptual understanding held by the student. So a couple things to keep in mind when designing pre-assessment: they should communicate the learning objectives, they should consider the fundamental components of the skill, they should avoid questions regarding specific factual knowledge, so things like dates, stuff like that, that's just not really demonstrating conceptual knowledge, rather just specific facts. And similarly, measure understanding by asking for elaboration or justification, which provides more opportunities to make some connections. I also added this quote because I really liked how it fit in here. Carol Ann Tomlinson, she said, "Assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction." I found that perfect way to explain pre-assessment. So the assessment today determines kind of the direction we'll go tomorrow. So I did mention that in an undergraduate setting, incorporating technology, games, and partner work helps to break up some of the monotonous lecture style of traditional learning. I think this is important in undergraduate education because there are still some professors pretty stuck in their way of teaching out students, so this can be a way to engage and kind of spice up a lecture. So some ways to implement pre-assessment. We have Kahoot. We all know and love Kahoot. Jeopardy games could be a way, brainstorming, surveys, questionnaires, clicker questions, partner work, yes and no cards, anticipation and predictions, things to come, KWL charts, writing prompts, and concept maps. So I break all of these ideas down into three kind of umbrella sections. So surveys, questionnaires, clicker questions, those are kind of pre-assessments that offer statistical analytical representation of where students lie in relation to their peers. And this kind of information offers information to the teacher on understanding and gives an opportunity to spend more time with students who have less understanding of that specific topic and offer more challenging questions to the students that do understand. Next section is based on making predictions and drawing connections between topics and ideas. So things like anticipation, predictions, and concept maps, as well as working collaboratively with peers, brainstorming, those kinds of things. These are all linked to making connections to past experiences or taking the perspective of someone else to make another connection. Research that I found explicitly links to constructing pre-assessment as it aims to manipulate opportunities to make these connections with not only yourself but with other people. And the last umbrella is things like yes or no cards or raise your hand if, which can provide a moment of feedback to the teacher on understanding in the classroom, and that can quickly modify instruction. So whether it's something that needs to be changed quickly, whether to move forward, move backward, or stick to an area that needs a little bit more instruction. Alrighty, next page, modifying learning objectives from pre-assessment feedback. So, as many of us know, the purpose of feedback is improvement. So, there is no possibility of improvement if feedback is not coupled with action. It is highly crucial that any feedback received is acted on in order to actually close the feedback loop and enhance learning and see growth in student achievement. So an analogy that I stumbled upon that I really liked is Gusky. He said, pre-assessment without action is like eating without digestion. I think that's a perfect way to regard pre-assessment and even feedback as a whole, because it's just like, yes, eating without digestion. So you're like putting it all in your mouth, but you're chewing it, but you're not actually swallowing it. You're not getting any of the nutrients. You're not getting any of the benefits. You're not getting any of the energy. So you're not yielding any of the results from feedback if you are not acting on it. So I included a little feedback loop diagram. So let's call assessment here in the middle, pre-assessment. We gather feedback from pre-assessment, and we adjust and make modifications to instruction, and then we instruct, and then we start the loop all over again. And the last page, I included some challenges associated with pre-assessment because obviously there's challenges. It's not perfect. So some challenges that I came across within my research is that if a student feels belittled or if they don't feel like they don't know anything by a pre-assessment, they may have negative associations with that process. So it's important to be open and honest with students with what the information is intended to do, help strengthen teaching and help students down the line when they know that they might be more comfortable with being wrong. I know it can be overwhelming, especially in first year classes, to come in and then a teacher asks, what do you know? What do you know? Do you know this? Do you know that? And you feel like you know nothing. That could be very overwhelming. So always coupling that with reassurance that students will acquire skills eventually when they engage with the material. Another challenge is sometimes the pre-assessment can warrant such in-depth information that it opens up a very distributed understanding within a classroom. So although, yes, it is helpful to have all that information, it can be tough to modify instruction if, for example, there's an equal split 4 ways. It's 4 different kind of levels of understanding. In an undergraduate setting, that instruction would then need to be modified to support all levels of understanding within the class, because it would be challenging to kind of target each section of understanding. Another challenge with pre-assessment is assessment naturally can just bring on test anxiety, which can hinder results. Biologically, there's chemicals in the brain that are brought on by anxiety, and they can disrupt a student's performance in assessment. So once their performance is hindered, their results are hindered, and it kind of renders that assessment not so valid. And along with that, the student's going to feel frustrated and emotional, perhaps, with the process, might disassociate when they come across it next. So to kind of combat that, I would suggest using non-traditional assessment tools such as games or fun, more interactive tools like I explained on a couple pages back. And again, reassuring students that information provided is not being graded, it's not being marked, it's not going towards any evaluations, purely just to help make learning experience more successful in the classroom. Another challenge is pre-assessment can be timely to construct, so you don't want to be implementing a bunch of weak assessments. It's better to focus on a strong one. And lastly, components of design and perceptions towards assessment all have the potential to mask the effectiveness of a pre-assessment. So pre-assessment needs to be designed strategically to warrant the type of understanding responses that the educator is seeking. So those are some challenges associated with pre-assessment. And I believe that is all I have for you today. So thank you for watching my screencast on my EDU 5499 Culminating project.